today on the CTV News at 5. Lethbridge's new Community Arts Centre officially opens its doors. Plus, police associations call for tougher penalties for parole violators. And who's really winning big in the gambling game?
CTV News with Jackie Scantlebury.
Good afternoon. Those in the Lethbridge arts community call it the realization of a 20-year dream. This morning, CASA, Lethbridge's new home for the arts, officially opened its doors. The 42,000 square foot facility is designed to foster love for all mediums of art, from drama to dance and even yoga. Daryl Rummold reports.
In a building where artistic dreams are meant to come true, one already has. The building itself is a long-standing dream of the arts community. With the ribbon freshly sliced, a joining of melody and song, artistry and art itself. A $20.6 million partnership between the federal, provincial and municipal governments, years in the making, begins.
I think it was worth the wait because we've really got the right building that will serve the community for probably the next 100 years. It's an amazing space. It's unique, and I don't think you'll find a building like this in any other city in North America.
Yet it's a building they wondered if they'd ever get. Original plans in 1990 called simply for an expansion to the aging Bowman Arts Centre. It faces $1 million repair, approved in the Capital Improvement Plan. Now, at 100 years old, she can rest momentarily while the city finds a way to repurpose her.
The Bowman was an old gal of the arts. This is the new one. It's bigger, it's better, and I think the entire community is going to benefit from it.
Dubbed CASA, this home for the arts features rooms for all disciplines. Freedom for groups or individuals to hone their craft. A new home to the university's Conservatory of Music. And a location officials say as perfect as the building itself.
So to me, it's a lifelong pursuit. It's a quality of life issue, and it's a means by which our community can come together.
Arts community members say this center fills a huge void inside the city, but there's still one more. They hope City Council will still consider putting in a performing arts center in the near future. That remains to be seen. For now, it's what can be heard that's important and being celebrated. Daryl Rummold, CTV News, Lethbridge.
I was expecting chopsticks. Each night this week, CASA will feature a different performance for the public. The city says several community groups have already expressed interest in the Bowman Arts Centre, but no immediate plans have been made for its future. Well, we know one thing for sure. That is that there will be an election in the fall. What we don't know and what he won't tell us is if Mayor Rayco Dodick will seek re-election.
I gotta ask you, are you gonna run again?
That's a good question. I will be announcing soon.
That's all you're gonna give me?
That's all. You will be notified, though.
Dodick has not said when the announcement will come or if he's made a decision. Dory, you said we were going to get more normal temperatures, and sure enough, that's what we're getting.
Yeah, that is what we're getting. We're also getting rain this coming weekend. It looks like Saturday is the target day for the highest amount of precipitation. But even Sunday and Monday, you know, there is that chance of that. But like you and I were talking about before we went to air, we said that, you know, there have been several May-long weekends that people had to shovel. So as long as we're not doing that, I mean, I know it's not perfect, but it's better than snow and digging out and really cold temperatures. So I'll have all the details coming up in a couple of minutes.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dory. A 20-year-old man is being treated for life-threatening injuries in a Calgary hospital after a rollover near Cardston this morning. Stars Air ambulance transported the man from ground EMS at the Fish and Wildlife landing pad in Cardston to the Foothills Hospital in Calgary. There was only one vehicle involved. The man's name has not been released. A Burdett man charged with voyeurism made his first court appearance this morning. 55-year-old Frederick Decker was charged after a video camera was discovered in the public washroom of a Tabor convenience store. The case was set over until May the 28th. And Lethbridge police have charged a 37-year-old man in connection with the sexual assault of a teenage girl. Investigators determined the man had sexually assaulted the 16-year-old at a Lethbridge home where the accused and the victim both lived. The subject will not be identified in order to protect the identity of the victim. He is scheduled to appear in court May 23rd. And a Coaldale man is facing a number of charges, including committing an indecent act while watching children playing in the yard of a city home. Officers were called after a man was seen watching kids on a yard on 70 Avenue South and then touching himself. 32-year-old Jacob Peters was arrested a short distance later. Police say they found pictures of child pornography on his cell phone as well. Now, police are trying to track down a standoff man wanted on outstanding arrest warrants. 26-year-old Robbie Tyson Blair Whiteman Left is charged with uttering threats and failing to comply with a probation order. If you've seen him, you're urged to contact either police or Crime Stoppers. Well, police associations across Canada say people who violate parole should face criminal charges. They say even violent offenders are being released from jail and should be held accountable for breaching parole conditions. Police Association representatives from across Alberta are meeting in Lethbridge today, and they're calling for targeted reforms aimed at repeat offenders. Terry Vogt reports.
Police associations have been calling for reforms to the parole system for more than 20 years. The case of Randall Hopley, the man convicted of kidnapping a 3-year-old Sparwood boy in 2011, is among 100 or so case studies being put forward where prisoners out on parole have been involved in serious crimes.
From an offender's perspective, it is a joke. It's a running joke across this country, and that's the sad reality of the kind of criminal justice system that we've seen develop in this country.
Under current laws, police can arrest those who breach probation or bail conditions, but that power doesn't extend to prisoners who've been released on parole.
We are asking the federal government to institute a new offense that represents breach of parole that you can arrest on site rather than having to go through the parole board or the Correctional Services of Canada people, which hasn't worked in the last 23 years.
The Edmonton Police Association has been fighting for these changes since the early 1990s, after a young police officer was shot and killed during a botched bank robbery. The driver of the getaway vehicle, Albert Folston, had been released 8 times on parole and committed a new offense each time.
And Correctional Service of Canada supported and the parole board granted, oh, what the heck, let's give him a 9th try. And in the company of another guy, another dirtbag who should never have been on an early release named Jerry Cruz, in a botched armed robbery, they shot and killed a young Edmonton police officer. The people of Canada are entitled to better than that.
The police associations have hired Scott Newark to put together a proposed new law, one that includes better use of electronic monitoring and making parole harder to get if a person commits a crime while on parole.
And there's the ones that should be in jail. We should have the ability to arrest them on the spot for breaching their parole conditions and put them back where they belong.
This is an issue of public safety across this country.
The police associations say they plan to continue lobby efforts at both the federal and provincial levels. They say community safety is an issue for all Canadians. Terry Vogt, CTV News, Lethbridge.
The draft legislation was presented to federal officials in Ottawa at the end of April. Looks like a wage freeze for teachers could continue. The province has announced it's planning to bring in legislation for a 4-year contract with Alberta teachers, even though not all school boards agree with it. If passed, Bill 26 will force school boards to accept a March 15th agreement between the province and Alberta Teachers Association that includes a 3-year wage freeze for teachers with a 2% increase in the 4th year. School board and ATA locals had until 3 p.m. Monday to vote on the deal. 97% of Alberta school boards voted in favor, including the Lethbridge chapter.
I'm not excited, as I don't think anybody would be, that government imposes a settlement. Our Lethbridge public teachers voted in favor of this framework initially, so we just plan to move forward and get on with collective bargaining at a local level.
It's a win that's nothing to be proud of. Alberta's gambling revenue may pay for health care and education, but a University of Lethbridge study shows about half of that revenue comes from gambling addicts. Bridget Brown takes a look at the problem and why it's worse here in Alberta than anywhere else in Canada.
Phil knows his odds aren't great, but most days here he is, plugging money into a VLT.
I love the possibility of winning something.
Phil says he's addicted.
Just
just know it.
The only VLTs in Alberta outside a bar or casino are in this University of Lethbridge office. Professor Robert Williams uses them to study gambling addiction.
So I just lost $60 in about 5 minutes.
His research shows at least 40% of gambling revenue in Alberta comes from people like Phil, gambling addicts. In some studies, that number is as high as 50%.
No matter how you cut it, 50%, when only 2 or 3% of the population are problem gamblers, and they're accounting for half of all your revenue, that's ethically problematic.
Alberta gets more of its budget from gambling than any other province, 4.2%. Compare that to about 3% in BC or 2% in Ontario.
We now have more money coming in from gambling than from natural gas royalties. This is unacceptable for most Albertans.
Especially when so much of that money is made on the backs of addicts.
If, in fact, half of all the money is coming from addicts, that would be a problematic statistic for a private business, but it's especially problematic for government, whose purpose is to serve the people as opposed to exploit the people.
The government says it isn't ignoring the problem.
The AGLC is going to be reviewing that study as well as many other studies that they receive, and obviously it's a concern for us as it is for Albertans.
Experts wonder just how seriously the province will fight the problem when it can ill afford to lose the money gambling addiction brings in. Bridget Brown, CTV News, Calgary.
Candidates in BC are making a last-minute push for voters. It's Election Day, and NDP leader Adrian Dix is in the midst of a marathon 24-hour stretch of campaigning with 15 election stops. Premier Christy Clark wrapped up her campaigning yesterday with 10 events. The Liberals have been in power in BC for the past 12 years. East Kootenay voters have until 9 o'clock tonight to cast their ballots. Well, no one in the world has coached more Olympic riders and international stars than George H. Morris. He's been long considered a founding father of a hunt-seat equation, and he's the focus of this episode of Farm.tv.
At 75, George continues to teach numerous clinics around the world.
In fact, I'm teaching people I'm sometimes having clinics are pupils of pupils of pupils of pupils, so it's 2 or 3 or 4 generations of pupils. I don't have many direct pupils.
What do you look for in a rider?
Well, I look for a rider with passion. I look for a rider with interest and passion. It's always nice if they have athletic ability, they have a sense of riding a horse, sense of jumping. Lean forward, stay with your horse. Stay forward. Don't sit in the back seat, because that's why it's so difficult for her.
When you give clinics, is there one thing you want riders to take away?
Well, I'm a great stickler with horses of discipline. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors and over petting horses and sugar, and that's not how to work with a horse. A horse is happiest when he's fairly treated.
Farm TV is brought to you by DA Building Systems.
On the markets, the S&P, Dow Jones both closed at record highs, led by gains in financial stocks. Coming up in health, why Angelina Jolie reveals the decision she made to decrease her risk of breast cancer.